This is what I know, that we are all connected, the universe reflected in each shining part. And everywhere I go, I recognize the faces, all of my relations in this one heart.
It is the month of December. And for December, we want to focus on love, gifts, the many gifts that come to us, and the idea of giving. And so as I took some time this week to consider what I wanted to bring forth in this time of gratitude, I remembered an individual from our community who left planet Earth this past June 19th, 2020. And I want to just talk about him and how grateful I am for the short time that I knew Paul DeBacca. I didn't know him as long as many people did, so I asked a few people to give me some insights, and I did a little research. And I want to share just a few things with you about this amazing, incredible man. There isn't a person who knew him that wouldn't describe him as kind and gentle. He was humble and he was respectful. He just had a gentleness about his nature. He was a man of character, a beautiful demonstration of someone of integrity and love all the time. Paul was a veteran, and he was a member of the Rocky Mountain Harley-Davidson Hog Group. He took time to educate people about motorcycles and bikers. He told me once that his desire was to change the attention of some people about how we look at people who ride motorcycles, especially Harley-Davidsons, and to look at that whole idea from a different perspective, because bikers today are not quite what bikers were years ago. He also took quite a bit of time to dispel some of the prejudices that he ran into with people in the motorcycle community. He was a grandmaster in Taekwondo, and he taught kids and adults all the time the beautiful artistry of Taekwondo. I ran into him last year at a motorcycle event that's called Thunder in the Rockies. And he was so sweet. The first time he saw me that day, he acknowledged me as Rev Jenn. And then as we were walking around through some of the displays and things, we bumped into each other again. And he approached me again and called me by name with my title. And anytime he was with someone else, he introduced me to that person. Well, after we were there an hour or so, he had bumped into me a couple of times. And he leaned over, and in that wonderful way that he spoke, where he kind of leaned into you a little bit and kind of stooped down a little bit to be at your level, he asked me, was there some other name I would prefer to be called at that particular event other than Reverend Jenn? And he was just so sweet and so sincere, because he wanted to make sure that he didn't harm me in any way or disrespect me. But he felt it was a little awkward to be calling me Reverend Jenn. At least that was my story. And I told him, I said, no, you can just call me Jenn while we're here. We don't have to do this whole title thing. I'm looking around at some of the bikers, and I'm thinking, everybody doesn't need to know I'm a reverend right now. And I didn't mean that in a way of hiding, but he understood exactly what I meant. And he was so beautiful and so sweet. He was caring and always checking on others. When we had our church building, Paul would not leave the building if he knew that there was someone still there working, especially if it was one of the other individuals in the community, one of the women in the community. And Marilyn Manasseh told me the story about how he would come in and check on her. And he would make sure that she was okay, especially if she was in the building alone. He would make sure that he walked her to her car and he checked the outside area. And Paul was the guy to call if you had a problem or a concern. He worked in a security business, and he was all about safety. And he was one of those people that if something didn't feel right or sound right, or you saw somebody outside that looked a little suspicious, You could call Paul, and he would be there in a heartbeat. I've had people tell me that he was one of the first people they met when they came to New Dawn, and how welcome he made them feel, and how special. And he was genuine. There wasn't an artificial thing about Paul. He was just so filled with integrity and authenticity. He was a licensed practitioner at New Dawn, so many of our community knew him in that role. He could take your hands or just sit by your side and take you into prayer, and you could just feel the beauty and the love that he has for God and our community. I found a quote one of his nieces posted on Facebook, and I apologize if he only had one niece, but she dedicated this to Paul. The most useful asset of a person is not a head full of knowledge, but a heart full of love, with ears open to listen and hands willing to help. That describes this amazing man. He was a gift to all of us. And so I just encourage you all to take time this week. Go into the quiet. Allow yourself to feel a heart full of gratitude for this beautiful, amazing man that we all knew for way too short of a time. And let's celebrate him with hearts full of gratitude. Thank you. Please pray with me. As we move into this time of inspiration, may we open our hearts and minds to whatever message is coming forth for us. May we also remember that we are of God, in God, and as God, and that there is one God, one power, one presence in all life. And we are connected to it and in it. We are united. In knowing this, may we realize and remember always that we are connected one to another. How beautiful this is. How reassuring it is to know this. And so as we just move into this time, let us relax into this space. Let us let go of anything outside of this moment, this now time, and just allow ourselves to be fully present. I call this time blessed and good. I call it perfect. And so it is. We were created in the likeness of God. Perfect God, perfect being. Perfect God, perfect being. So the question comes up, are we really perfect? Are we all perfect in our humanness? And I would have to say, probably not. Probably not. Not in our daily life. But the science of mind teaches us to look beyond conditions, to look inside, into the being inside it, to know the heart, the mind, the spirit of the person, to align our consciousness with the divine pattern of wholeness. Perfect God, perfect being. When we acknowledge the reality of our life, we may find sometimes that there is a need for internal healing, healing of the past, healing of traumas and things that have taken place in our lives. And when we don't recognize this and we don't realize this, some of these traumas and dramas, some of these things that have happened to us show up in not so pleasant ways sometimes. We are moving into a new theme this month, and it is celebrating divine truth for the month of December. And today's talk title is Welcoming the Shadow. Not exactly how I wanted to kick off the month of December, the shadow. I think many of us know what that means, but if you don't, we're going to talk about it. You see, the ego is also considered to be a part of the shadow that we have. And it is limited thought. The ego has a limitation about how it looks at things. And its sole purpose, its entire purpose, is to keep us safe. So in order to keep us safe, the ego responds from the past. It responds from the criteria and the experiences and the things that we've gone through in our lives in the past. And the ego knows where to draw the line, where to stop us, where to keep us reeled in and safe much of the time. And so when we are in ego mode, we're bound to make a few mistakes. And we must become aware that our individual ego builds up the burden of shadow in our human nature. Now, many people think that the solution to this is to shut it down, kill it off, bury it, detach from it, get away from it. Whether I'm talking about the ego or referring to it as shadow, it doesn't matter. But if I can just blank it out, if I can move away from it, then I can be my divine self. And that's not the truth. That is just not the truth. That doesn't work for us. Ernest Holmes says this: "We abide under the shadow of everlasting truth." That sounds like the shadow is giving me some type of insight or awareness to my life. Every part of who you are is who you are. Every part of who I am, every part of my behavior, my personality, my ideas, my thoughts is who I am. If I were to suddenly remove a chunk of it or a piece of it and put it over here and walk away from it, then I'm not really who I am anymore. I have thrown something out of kilter, if you will. I've thrown something off balance. And it doesn't work for us in that way. So think about it this way. I'll use myself as an example since I happen to be the one here. Sometimes I'm introspective. Sometimes I'm very calm and quiet and peaceful. Sometimes I'm a really good listener. Sometimes I'm loud and rowdy. Sometimes I'm a little obnoxious. Sometimes I say things that I wish I hadn't said. And sometimes I can be impatient and critical. And all of these things are all a part of me. Now, I don't go out there and profess to be the more obnoxious side and just tell you to deal with it. It's who I am. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, for me, myself, to recognize all of these components that make me up and who I am, and to embrace them. You see, when we accept the other side of us, our shadow self, and if we welcome it, if you will, we can find ourselves to be more compassionate towards ourselves. And it always begins here. I talk about this all the time. If I can be more compassionate with myself, more forgiving of the crazy things that I do, then I can demonstrate that compassion towards the rest of the world. We talked about compassion all last month. We should have this one down a little bit. So I want to pay attention to that. In this place of embracing, welcoming, accepting the shadow side, we also get to be forgiving. Forgiving of ourselves, our mistakes, our choices that maybe didn't pan out quite the way we wanted them to. Jacob Lieberman teaches us this: a shadow is produced when an object blocks the light. I think we're all familiar with this. Whenever we block the guiding light of our life, we create a shadow. Now, I'm not talking about this in the sense that we go out in the sunshine and we've created a shadow. In this particular instance, I'm talking about blocking the guiding light, blocking the light of spirit that works through us and in us. We may create a shadow piece of who we are, a shadow component. But when we are transparent and in alignment with the source of light, it's like when the sun is directly over our head and there's no shadow around us. Then we can see the shadow almost disappear. and we can operate from that place of being in the light. So when we recognize our shadow, this can be a catalyst for us towards change, transformation. I call it, and many people call it, I think I've heard this elsewhere, self-correcting. When I'm going down this path, plodding along, and I do something obnoxious or out of alignment with how I want to be, how I choose to be, if I harm someone else and I recognize it, I become aware of it, I can self-correct. I can address the situation. I can address the conversation or the individual. I can make it better. Maybe not fix it, but I can adjust it. And that's what we need to be aware of, is aware in all things that everything we're doing, we're impacting ourselves and others. I mean, how often in your life did someone come up to you and say, you know, you really hurt my feelings when you did such and such, and you're thinking, I don't even remember doing that. Was I even there? And to take a deep breath and just go into that place of whatever this individual is talking about, I impacted them in some way. Let's work through this together. Let's address it, and let's be aware of what's showing up. The shadow is considered the negative side of the personality. But when we say negative side, it means there's also a positive side. The two together create balance to some degree. So the sum of all unpleasant properties or traits that a person wants to hide is considered the shadow. It's something that we don't see when we go into the darkness. So that's where that idea comes from, that concept comes from. What happens is we begin to feel inferior or worthless. And we have, these things are showing up as kind of a second personality. So if you've ever done a personality assessment, the Enneagram I've talked about before has this very positive place where this is kind of who you are most of the time. But there are these alternate personalities in the chart system that say, but when you are stressed, you're going to behave this way. But when you are completely calm and all's right with your world, you're going to behave this way. I know this to be the truth because I'm a person that doesn't necessarily get meticulous about detail in certain things. But when I'm stressed or when I feel like it really matters, I become a perfectionist that will drive you crazy. So I know that that is a part of my personality. And I'm very aware of it, and I'm very aware when it shows up. Every one of us has a shadow. In fact, it is the shadow side that makes us human. So we don't want to discount it or discredit it because it's a part of us. Jacob Lieberman says this: what we call our shadow is nothing more than an aspect of our nature waiting to be embraced and reclaimed. Sounds like it's not such a bad thing. So when we can move into this with a level of awareness, and we have an opportunity to change or correct our behavior, we become more connected, more in tune to ourselves and the world around us. If we deny it and we isolate it, it will impact us in a way that we will go boldly down this path, never thinking we've ever done anything wrong. But people are being harmed in the process. It's an interesting thing to think about. I found this comment here that says, in a moment of unawareness, what has been oppressed can suddenly erupt as aggression. Where have we seen this happening in the world today? Where there are aggressive acts and aggressive behaviors, it is because there is a group that is not aware of what's happening, or individuals who don't seem to be aware of not only what's happening, but what their role is in the process. An overinflated ego projects the shadow onto other people. So not only will this individual sometimes become aggressive, but this person will decide it's not me, it's you. I think we've witnessed this in some situations. Now, I'm not going to tell you to go out and correct all those guys, because that's not what we're about. It's all about self-reflection, inner reflection. What can I do? How can I shift? How can I change? And how can I grow? The acceptance of the shadow is seen as a therapeutic aim of confrontation with one's own shadow. Metaphysical understanding relates in physical properties to the shadow. The shadow, or we may call it ego, was defined by Wayne Dyer years ago as an acronym, EGO, edging God out. When I go down my merry way and I think I have a better idea and I know more and I'm not listening to that beautiful, wonderful voice of inspiration, that higher power, that presence within me, that is when I go down that path and I create harm. And I can look back on my life and look at opportunities that I missed and challenges that I created. We are called to cultivate recognition of our divinity. We are being prompted to remember that we came from Source, that we are divine beings having a human experience. Let us continue the act of compassion going forward. Let us welcome and embrace our shadow, remembering that there are alternatives and we don't have to allow it to rule us or our behavior. Rachel Wolkin says this: "Don't be afraid of your shadow. It's really just a constant reminder that there's a light all around you." What a beautiful picture. This week, let's take time to welcome and embrace all parts of who we are. That brings us to true love and compassion. Please pray with me. We bring this message to a close today knowing that God is in all things. That wherever we are in the day, we can look outside and see evidence of Spirit, evidence of the Creator. Whether there is snow on the ground or falling leaves or a breeze or blue sky or clouds, we know God is in all of this. And so this week we just take the time to breathe that in. Breathe that in with the acceptance and the awareness that we get to be complete in who we are, whole, perfect, complete. We get to be accepting of every facet of our being, and we get to learn how to make the changes and the adjustments that are necessary for us to have our best life and for us to be that best connection to others. What a perfect time to focus on this. What a perfect time to recognize the richness of who we are, the blessings of who we are, and sharing those with others. I call this time and this week blessed. I know it's perfect, and I know all people everywhere are blessed by God. So we just let this go, knowing that as we turn it over to the mind of God, these words are heard, these words are embraced, and these words are moved into that beautiful place of creativity that is Spirit. And it all comes forth unfolding for our good and our best good. So I simply give thanks for the opportunity to be here now, to be present on planet Earth, to be a part of all life, and to speak these words. I release them, I let them go, and so it is.
This is what I know, that we are all connected, the universe reflected in each shining